I think this is probably one of the most powerful schools that the Army has. And I'll tell you why. It's about making humans better humans.
All right, so we are on episode to be numbered later of the Hindsight, our special leadership series. Today we are joined by
Amy Kane. I am the State Equal Employment Manager for the Rhode Island National Guard.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry you didn't get to meet my regular co-host. We had some fiscal year issues. Hopefully we'll have her back for the next episode. For those of you at home who tuned in just for Airman Capozzi, I apologize.
I do too.
She's great. So anyway, we wanted to bring you in today, talk a little bit about leadership, mentorship, maybe some differences between the two. But since you are not uniformed in your current job, why don't you give everyone a brief rundown of your background? Why are you on the podcast with me?
Sure. So I am a Title V employee with the Rhode Island National Guard. So I'm a civilian DOD employee. I oversee the Equal Opportunity Program on the military side, both Air and Army. And during the day, Monday through Friday, I am the director of the EEO program. So Equal Employment Opportunity.
Okay, great. And I have no idea what that is.
It's a lot of blah, blah, blah. For making sure that people feel comfortable. The climate is safe and welcoming, and if there are any problems with anyone feeling some kind of way or discriminated against in any way, I provide that nexus to come and talk with. Got
it. I mean, if you're good at just blah, 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 boy, do I have a job for you in public affairs. Let me tell you.
Watch out, Capozzi. Coming after your job.
Exactly. My new co-host. So good at blah, blah, blah. But in seriousness, though, equal opportunity. One more time, because I'm going to get those two confused. EO and EOO.
Right. So equal employment opportunity.
Okay. Got it. Super important. And that does that take care of both of our AGR and technician force, or is that strictly for the technician force?
Sure. So that's strictly for the technician force. And then the EO program are all your military personnel. So there's your AGR and Title 32 on military status.
Got it. Okay, and what's your military background? Because I know you didn't just walk into that job.
So I have a varied background, like many National Guard members. I came into the National Guard at the young age of just shy of 19 years old, and loved the National Guard so much. I took on an AGR recruiting job. I was one of the youngest female recruiters in the state of Rhode Island at the time, 1980 something. And then I really enjoyed the Guard and active duty, that I took a rank bust, if you will, to an E4, and I went active duty. So I did that for a few years, and then transitioned off of active duty back into the Guard and served with the 1st of the 126th Aviation as an intel analyst. That was my initial career. And then got married and had a baby and decided that that was the end of my military career. So I thought. And then 11 years later, I came back in, and Sergeant Kuchar enlisted me back into the National Guard, and I reclassified as a 42 Alpha because I had such a break in service that my intel analyst years were over unless I wanted to go back to a full school. So I reclassed as a 42 Alpha, and here I am. And in the meantime, I taught for 20 years in public education.
Okay. That's a pretty common story. That's like The Godfather. Every time you think you leave, draw you back in.
They really do. Well, I wanted to give back to an organization that gave me so much.
That makes sense. So can you expand on that a little bit? Like what so obviously you were out there for 11 years doing your education thing. what hit you? What made you say, like, gosh, Amy, it's time for me to put the uniform back on?
I think it was Sergeant Kuchar, who was my my recruiter. I ran into him at a festival with my daughter, and there was a push-up, I think, competition or something. And so he knew that I was a teacher at Shea and a guidance counselor, and he said, why don't you go back in and finish your last few years with a retirement? And I thought, hey, why not? So Team Kane and I met, and we talked about it and decided to come back in. And I definitely wanted to come back in and try to give back, like I said earlier, to an organization that gave me so much. It really kind of helped me initially in steering me into going to college and pursuing a teacher's degree. So I wanted to come back. And when I did come back in, I was able to work with Sharon Harmon's team over at Military Family Programs, which fit quite nicely into my background.
Yeah, that's a great team over there.
Right.
I love Colonel Harmon. She's like one of my all-time favorites. Love her.
And for a little while, Colonel Harmon was a mentor that I went to for advice and direction, pointing direction, with my military career.
Okay. So now that we've broached the subject of mentorship, you've had one example. How many mentors do you think you've had?
I would. That's a loaded question. I would say within the National Guard, I can think of 4 people that I have actually reached out to, and whether they knew it or not, they were my mentor.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Whether they knew it or not, give me an example of someone who may have been hoodwinked into being your mentor.
So, well, for example, on some level, yourself. Okay. Yeah.
That's a terrible life choice. For those of you listening at home, do not select me as your mentor.
We worked out a few years back, and I knew that you were selected as a company commander and you went on deployment. And so right there, the fact that you were chosen to be a company commander and to go on that deployment, I found like, wow, there's some leadership skill there I need to hone in on. For me, and then I followed some of your, I find your, the way that you approach different people and the way that you approach a task given to you is extremely professional. So there are some times where I look at an action, someone doing something or saying something, and I'm like, I like the way that that person handles himself or herself in a given situation. And so, believe it or not, you were a mentor for a couple of incidents that I observed within you.
Okay. Well, I'm flattered. I still encourage you to find a different mentor. That's a terrible life choice.
But a mentor that, mentorship is volunteer on both sides. The mentor and the mentee should have some say. And as many times as I've wanted to mentor somebody, the mentee, the soldier who I want to mentor, might not gravitate toward me. It's just not going to work out. It definitely has to be the person, the mentee seeking someone out. That's important.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And it's what I love about this conversation is that it's so important and it's so broad. I could talk about this all day.
Right? We spend trillions of dollars in the military training soldiers. We invest a lot of money and time into soldiers and training. We need to invest also in building our bench. And so we need to take time to mentor because we're not going to be here forever. Someone has to fill our seat. And so how else are you going to do that, other than trying to build or create a leader to take your place? Yeah,
absolutely. So I had a professor in my ROTC program who used to express it this way, that the Navy's got ships and everything they do is based around ships, maintaining them, driving them, fighting them. The Air Force has planes building them, maintaining them, fighting them. The Army's got people. And if you are not building, training, maintaining, and fighting your people, then like, what are you even doing?
Absolutely.
Like that's the human in your organization is the platform through which we complete our jobs.
Yeah, it's our greatest resource.
Absolutely. So here's a question for you, because I've been toying with this one all day. The difference between mentorship and leadership. Because we've all had leaders, we've all had mentors, we've had good and bad examples of both. But what's the difference?
Well, that's a great question. I think not all leaders can be mentors. You can't force a mentorship, if you will. That person anyone who wants to be mentored has to be able to approach someone. And there's trust and there's confidence. That's what that person is looking for in a mentor. So not all leaders can be a mentor for a given person. I think mentoring somebody can lead to leadership development. Absolutely, 100%. I think it's one of the biggest factors when it comes to developing leaders is mentorship. But, I don't know if all leaders would make for a good mentor, because time plays a role in that. Mm-hmm. And I also think that commitment plays a role in being a mentor. And so some people can't commit, nor do they have the time, Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the way I've been using them, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but as I was driving in today thinking about this is what occurred to me. And just sort of the way I've used those two words is I've always used a leadership to describe an organizationally based happening, right? Someone who is a good leader, he moves an organization towards a mission.
Or she,
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
When I use he, it's definitely gender inclusive. This is very bad habits of mine. And a mentor has always, the way I've used it, has always been very personally based. A mentor builds a better soldier, and a leader builds a better organization. A mentor leads a person to better themselves. A leader leads to a mission accomplishment. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it's always how I've used it.
Sure, I think it's. I think that's one way. We like to compartmentalize things.
We certainly do. We like tagging them, naming them.
Like you're a mentor, you're a leader, you're both. And you can be both, or you can be one or the other. Again, the most important thing about being a mentor is understanding that the mentee has to pick you. There's something about you that strikes that person as, hey, I can learn something from this individual, whether it's a quality trait or an actual task that individual wants to learn. There's something, because a mentor is usually a more experienced individual than the mentee.
Which brings up my next question. Who can be a mentor? When does the responsibility for mentorship sort of arrive at your doorstep?
I think any soldier can be a mentor who has something to offer to that individual. So, if you look at ADP 6-22, it's a volunteer relationship between the mentor and the mentee. And the mentor is usually someone who's more experienced. So this could be a private out of basic and AIT who is maybe mentoring somebody in RSP. Okay. Or it could be an RSP soldier who is mentoring the level 1, or somebody who's thinking about the military, and they're going to maybe someone approach them and said, hey, can you mentor me through this process? As long as they're voluntarily willing to do that and to put the commitment in, because it is a commitment, right? Mm-hmm. To take on a mentee. Absolutely.
Do you think people have a responsibility to be a mentor?
That's a great question. I think if you are a person in a leadership role and you have something to offer, and it's going to help the organization to build that bench, and to create individuals to fill a void, then I would say you do.
I would agree with that completely.
Yeah. And I also think it's so fulfilling. I think human beings as a whole, not that I'm speaking for all human beings, but I think I can say that most people like to help people. And, we get excited when we help somebody, or we're there and we can answer a question for somebody. Information is power, or knowledge is power. We like to instill that, in others. And so I think it's so rewarding to take on a mentor position.
Sure. It allows us to pretend that, like, if I teach somebody something, they won't make the same mistakes I did. Which is, of course, completely untrue, right? Anyone who's had kids can tell you that giving someone the right answer does not guarantee success.
No. But I have also approached people and said, hey, can I, come to you on a weekly basis? Would you be a mentor? Would you be willing to be a mentor? And I've had people say, right now, I just don't have the time to commit. I don't, and so it's important to understand that it is a relationship that's volunteer on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you have advice for someone who's new to the organization, doesn't have a mentor yet? Maybe they're just an M-Day, an M-Day soldiers, M-Day airman, doesn't get a whole lot of face time with the organization. How important is it for them to find a mentor, and how should they go about doing it?
Sure. So I know that on the Army side, I cannot speak for air side, but on the Army side, we have these PAT teams, the peer assistant teams. And there are sponsors in some units, that are assigned. Hopefully, the person that is in a unit, whether it's Air or Army, has a supervisor that they can approach, or a leader of some, a platoon leader, or that they could go to and ask, hey, who do you think I should, But I think a lot of times people tend to watch, at least I'd like to think so, watch individuals, and based on people's actions or reactions, they tend to gravitate toward what they want. Like, I want to be like that master sergeant, or that, staff sergeant or tech sergeant. They have what it takes, and I want to be like that. How can I be like that? I remember when I was a guidance counselor at Shea, 9th grade, first day, this girl, Marisol, I'll never forget this, came into my office and said, she had a piece of paper with the class president's name, who happened to be number 1, female. And she said, I want to meet her. I understand she is number 1 in the class, and I want to find out how she got there. So what do I need to do to be like her? And I said, well, you started in the right place. You came to the guidance office. So, I just thought that was really cool. There was somebody who had eye on the prize and was looking for direction,
Yeah, that's great. So one not failed attempt. It certainly looked like a failed attempt for a long time, but one delayed successful attempt at finding a mentor was actually going back to the deployment. And I had been invited to come be the commander. And the invitation had been routed through my entire chain of command. So, every 05 and 06 in the state knew that I was being invited before I did. So there was no pressure there.
Right.
And so out of the blue, I emailed Colonel Berlanga, who was the HRO at the time. And I said, I'm struggling with, I know you don't know me. We've never formally met. But I'm struggling with this because I feel like the deployment may either impact negatively or positively. I don't know. But it'll have an impact on my attempt to get a full-time permanent position here in the Guard. Can I just pick your brain for a little bit? Again, having never met her before. She just was the HRO, and that human. And it was great. Had a great 10, 15-minute conversation with her. I think she was very surprised because, who the heck is this kid? But, and then really didn't have any further interaction with her for years. And then I find myself working for her again now. And I think having set the stage years ago really helped this time around. I don't know. I haven't spoken with her specifically about that event, but for me personally, I feel way more comfortable just doing a drive-by at her office today because I reached out. And I had that face-to-face contact. So I don't know what the advice is to anyone back home. I don't know if I would cold call the HRO again, but it's a technique.
It is a technique.
It is a technique.
And it worked.
I think it did. I think I have a good relationship with the chief of staff. I hope I do. I like her a great deal. So,
right, we might find out after this podcast.
Yeah. Pack your stuff. You've got 10 minutes. Security will be here. All right. So over the break, we were talking a little bit about like a mentorship program here in the state.
So it's interesting that you bring that up. I'm a member of the Joint Diversity Executive Council, which you are a member also as the PAO. I think PAO and recruiting and retention, both Army and Air, are the biggest contributors to the Joint Diversity Executive Council. So the JDIC meets on a quarterly basis, the Executive Council, and one thing that we have to go over, review, is the TAGS checklist. And there are 9 questions. And one of the questions is, does your state have a mentorship program? And that is the only question that we have answered succinctly since I've been on the JDIC. No. We don't have a clear cut, like, this is our mentorship program. And I don't think there are a lot of 54s, there are a lot of states amongst the 54, I should say, that do not have a set mentorship program. We do have, and I remember so clearly that when we did this, we murder board mentorship in the Guard. And it was, that discussion was led by Brigadier General Chevalier. And we discovered that we have a lot of little M's floating out there, a lot of programs and a lot of partnerships that are mentoring or provide mentorship. But we don't have a just, hey, you're looking for a mentor, here's a list of people that you can go to. Brigadier General Reyna is really, really passionate about mentorship and wants to create this kind of repository, this place that we can put mentorship profiles. And there have been some collected within the last year and a half. And so they're right now kind of in limbo. We're looking for a secure place that any soldier or airman can access the profile. And depending on that individual's need, they can select a mentor. Because a mentor can be cross, I can look at somebody from the air for mentorship. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same service,
So that just clicked with me because I remember we've talked about that before. And we never had the easy, everyone can get access to it, shared site.
Correct.
Just clicked with me that maybe the Army just provided us the answer to that with the 0365 rollout. You can stand up a SharePoint within the Army.mil 0365 family. I will revisit this with the 6.
Excellent.
Mental check.
That sounds like another podcast.
So we had talked a little bit about pockets of mentors. And you mentioned programs. My head went to a different place. Like a couple of people who have a proclivity for collecting mentees. So I want you to give me an example of a program, a little M program.
So I mentioned it earlier. So the peer assistant teams would be a small M. The sponsors at a unit could be the small M. The JDIC, Joint Diversity Executive Council, could be a small M. RSP.
Sure. So we just had a couple of sergeants from the RSP program recently, Sergeant Corcoran and Mercado.
Right.
Super good humans. I don't know if you've met them.
Yes, I know them very well.
Unbelievably good humans. Talked about how they were running the RSP in a way that sounded an awful lot like mentorship. Sounded an awful lot like giving people the tools to build themselves better, as opposed to practicing being uncomfortable, right? They're not practicing basic training. They're like actually giving people real tools, real resources to improve themselves. Huge fans of those two.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge fan of those two. Another big, I'm a big fan of another person. We talked a little bit about Master Sergeant Jody Dove.
Yes.
So when I first got on orders for my very first long-term ADOS tour, I was working up on the second deck as a public affairs specialist, generally kind of ignorant of the ways of the Army, right? I had been a platoon leader at the 861st, which is about as far removed from the National Guard as you can possibly be. Knew almost nothing about how to be a lieutenant in the Army. Was very good at being a platoon leader in the 861st. No idea how to be a lieutenant in the Army. And I was making some pretty easy mistakes to make as a young, dumb lieutenant. Not signing my emails correctly, things of that nature. And Master Sergeant Jody Dove found me after PT one day, and he's like, man, you're making a complete jerk of yourself. Come down to my office at 1000 and let me show you some stuff. And if you've met him, it sounded way more grumpy than that. I was like, oh, man, how bad am I? I'm getting yelled at by, I think he was an E7 at the time. Right. I was like, ah. So, long story short, I went down and he showed me how to write an email. Like, this is, like, no crap. This is what your signature line needs to be. This is how you need to end your email. This is how you open it. This is how you write it. This is how you end it. And just like little tips and tricks like that. Right. And
informal mentorship.
Right. And to this day, I still write, Jody, if you're out there listening, to this day, I still write my emails exactly the way he showed me.
Yep, there you go.
I organize my Outlook exactly the same way he shows me. And that impact will, I don't know if you can put a number on that. I don't know if you can measure that, but like, I plan on doing 30 years, and for 30 years, I will take those lessons and have improved myself. And I will
until the next person comes along and says, come over here.
Yeah.
Let me show you how to do this. Right?
You send emails like a dinosaur. Who taught you to do this? And then I pass those along to every lieutenant I've ever had.
Right.
My platoon leaders when I was a company commander, they got pretty much exactly the same lesson that I got. So there you go. Sometimes mentors just find you.
They do. But you were willing, right,
oh, yeah.
to take that information in, which is a big part of it too.
Yeah.
You never know the impact that an action or or anything could have on someone else, and be lifelong like that apparently has been, so that's great.
I think this is a personal thing. This is definitely not a truism, objectively speaking, but this is a mark truth that teaching people and watching them grow has got to be the most rewarding thing I do. Like of all the tasks, duties, and obligations I've had in the Army, watching soldiers thrive, watching my lieutenants grow has been like by far, like it's not even close. It is by far my favorite part of the job.
And that's why you would be a great mentor, because you're receptive to it, you're open to it, and you like the outcome of it.
Well, yeah, but you should probably know a lot more than I do to be a good mentor. That's why I keep telling you. I don't actually know much. I can't pass along too many things. But you got me blushing. You're not getting invited back. I don't like blushing.
So there are a couple of places that if you're interested and you want to learn more about mentorship, you can explore. There's actually a book, Mentorship 101, that's out there. You can Google that and get that. There's also a book called The 3 Meter Zone. It was written by Command Sergeant Major Pendry. And so that's a good book. It's a good read on mentorship in the military. But it all starts with Army leadership, ADP 6-22. And I'm sure the Air Force has an AFI or something that we can refer to.
I'm sure they do.
Yes.
They do love them some written works.
Yes. If Capozzi was here, I'm sure she would know that.
Fair enough. So if those are free resources, we can link those in the description of the video.
Oh, that would be great.
If those are paid for resources, I'm afraid I can't do that.
Right.
So,
but fun fact.
Yep.
If you're looking for professional development books, such as The 3 Meter Zone, I can purchase those with my EEO and EO funds. So anything that's professional development, working on your team building, that type of scenario, I can definitely use my funds for that. So
Wow. So that's news to me.
So there you go.
That sounds really cool. Okay.
Another thing that's another benefit from mentoring and the mentorship program as a whole is it's just being connected. It's connecting to someone on some level. And when you're connected, you feel included. And when you're included, you're satisfied or you're happy, which means that you're apt to stay within that organization. So I think it's really important for connectivity, people connecting to each other, and just that whole inclusion piece of it. And when people feel included, they're generally feeling pretty good, and probably will re-enlist or spread the word.
Yeah, I will second that. Absolutely. I'll reach back to my deployed experience and say that there will come a time, not there may come, there will come a time when your officers and your soldiers just are no longer in it for the mission. They're just too tired. They've just been beaten too much for too long, and they will not push any further for the mission. But that they will push for is each other. And they'll push for you. And that can be a really heavy burden for what it's worth, to have soldiers and officers under your command who just cannot take another step for the flag, but they will take another step for you because you've connected with them. It's an unbelievable feeling. The amount of responsibility and the weight that realization carries is huge. They trust you. They've put their entire well-being in your hands. And what I like about mentorship is that you're practicing that repetition of putting them putting their well-being in your hands in a very minor scale, right? When someone says to you, I would like you to be my mentor, or in a less obvious way, can you show me how to do this thing, right? They're opening themselves up. They're saying, I would like to trust you enough to teach me this thing I think I need to know, right? Like, I feel like I'll be a better professional or better personal, whatever. I want to be better, and I think you can help me with that. It's like this very small repetition of trust. And that comes back and pays you back, tenfold in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Had a soldier approach me a couple of years ago. She was going through warrior competition, and I think it was NCO boards. And she reached out to me to be her mentor. And I thought, well, I'm not the best shooter out there. I'm not the best, commo person to set up the radio piece of it. Those tasks that she had to go through, and searching cars and things like that. So I was kind of surprised that she reached out to me, and she's like, I have all that down. I don't need you for that. And I said, well, what would you like me to mentor? I need you to be because you're a positive person, and you are like a big cheerleader, and you're resilient, and I need that in my life. And I thought, wow, all right then, I'm in, sign me up. Okay, and so be it.
That's a good point, that not all mentorship is like super technical professional tasks, right? Sometimes mentorship really is just that very personal component. It's like, hey, I need someone who believes in me.
Correct.
Or I need someone just to be there. It's crazy to me how many soldiers just need that, right? Someone just to be there and say,
and just to listen.
Yeah. And wow. Now I'm deep in my feels again. But so there's some leadership advice from me to whoever's listening. Take the time to connect with your soldiers. It is unbelievably rewarding, and they are almost universally worth it.
And I think you hit it too on the nail earlier when we were talking, and you said, I might not be the person to mentor you, but I know somebody. And I think that's huge because you as a company commander, if we're going back, revisiting that, you as a commander or a first sergeant or a platoon sergeant, you may not want to mentor said individual, but you can connect that person with somebody else.
Yeah. That's a great, strong advantage of being in public affairs. I've got like half the Rhode Island National Guard in my contact list.
Right.
It's like you punch sergeant into my iPhone and you get like 130 hits. It's ridiculous. And I take that very seriously. That's a big responsibility, at least I feel it is, to connect people with where I think at least an opportunity. I don't know if this person's the right mentor for you, but like at the very least, let's give it a shot. So I was telling you on break, one way that I approach this is whenever I see a brand new lieutenant twice in Joint Force Headquarters, right? If they're just here for an ID card, I'm not going to bother them. But if I've seen them twice, it means they're either new here or, they've just come on an ADOS tour, or maybe they're a new technician hire. If I've seen you twice, you're now in my full-time family. And I'll just stop and talk to you. Find out, hey, where'd you commission from? What's your branch? What would you like to accomplish? Like where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? And do you have a mentor? And if they say no, which is, I'd say about 50-50. Half of them say, yeah, I got somebody. Perfect. Great. Half of them say, I'm really lost. I don't really know what I'm doing here. It's like, all right, great. I know a guy or a girl. I take a lot of pride in that. It's like, hey, you want to be finance, you want to be JAG, you want to be a technician, you want to be an AGR. Like, I know that person. Let me hook you up.
So again, that connectedness comes into play. You connecting people together, which is great.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, I don't know anything about being a logistics officer. Like, not the first thing. But I know a guy.
Right.
You tell me, like, I really love repairing vehicles and ordering parts. It's like, man, sounds great. Let me introduce you to somebody.
Let me show you the office.
Yeah. But, I think that's important. I remember when I was a first lieutenant, and it was like day one on the second deck, and I was completely lost. I was swimming in a sea of lieutenant colonels, generals. I'm like, I don't know these people. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't even know where the fax machine is. This is crazy. Colonel Prenti's like,
I don't even think, wait, that's fax machine? Is that what you asked for?
I'm older than I look. Yeah. No, Colonel Prenti's like, I printed something off. Go grab it for me. I'm like, I don't even know where that is. Like, no idea what was going on. And if Master Sergeant Dove hadn't grabbed me and like helped screw my head on straight, I don't know if I would have ever been invited to apply for a full-time job, right? Like that could have spiraled so far out of control. I could have made a complete jerk of myself and never gotten company command, never been invited to come back to the technician force.
But you were. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
because
so
somebody stopped and gave you a few minutes of their time and invested that time in you.
Yeah. So to extrapolate that to a larger force taking care of soldiers en masse, on a microcosm, that happens all the time with the end of enlistment periods, the end of obligated service periods. All the time, soldiers all around you are making that decision. I'm going to ETS or I'm going to re-enlist. Officers are making the decision. I'm going to get out. I'm going to stay in. And a lot of that, like an enormous part of that decision is, do I belong here? Right? Like, am I a part of this group? Mentorship plays a huge role in that, at least in my opinion. Like, if someone has mentored you and has like taken the time to invest in you and help you, it's helped include you, it's a lot harder to leave. You don't want to leave. Whereas if you've just been down there at the M-Day unit, you've just come in just for your drills, and as soon as they call your name off and checked you as present, like you don't get talked to again, that guy's going to get out.
Yeah. And that's where, leaders need to know their soldiers or wingmen, need to be involved, need to make sure that people feel a part of something, a part of the organization in this case. So again, connecting people together. And there are a lot of ways to do that. There are a lot of, you can go to schools to get that connectiveness, like MRT school, the assist school. become a unit victim advocate, become an EO representative for your unit. So there are ways to connect. Join the Joint Diversity Executive Council. Join the EO group that puts together observation, the observances that we have, every month. So there are ways that you can be part of the organization or join small groups to get that connectedness or becoming part of feeling included. And if it's mentoring, then reach out to somebody in your unit and say, hey, I'm interested in mentoring. How do I start this?
I want to talk a little bit about taking care of soldiers. So we had talked a little bit about some of the programs we have around here, EO, MRT, SHARP, that address, I guess, the health and well-being of soldiers, right? So we have programs that are very obviously about the professional development of soldiers. Right. We'll send you to your NCOES. We will send you to an MOS producing school. We will go well out of our way to make sure you can shoot, move, and communicate according to the needs of the Army. But our soldiers are so much more than just a professional tool, right? They are not a hammer and you can pull out of a toolbox and whack a nail and put them back. Like, they're humans.
Right.
And taking care of them is so much more complicated than just providing them with professional development. So I want to talk a little bit about some of that, maybe personal development, maybe emotional. I don't really care so much about what it's called, but what I care about is the humanity of that soldier.
Sure. It's very important.
Yeah. So pick a program, MRT, EO, SHARP. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So I'm a level 2 MRT person. So we can talk about that if you'd like. Master resilience training is, there are 14 skills. And over a course of 2 years, you're supposed to kind of cycle through those skills with your MRT and your unit. I think this is probably one of the most powerful schools that the Army has. And I'll tell you why. It's about making humans better humans. It's about self-awareness. And when you're self-aware, you can be self-aware of other people, aware of their behaviors. It's about understanding what triggers you and what may trigger someone else. So it's a lot of discovering of yourself and others. And I think that is really key when dealing with soldiers or airmen, because we all are all human, and we realize that this is one of the biggest resources, right? Soldiers and airmen to our organization. And with that in mind, how do we make ourselves better? I think that's a program that may be underrated or underutilized. I'm not quite sure. I know that Rhode Island is in the green with trained MRTs, but it is a fantastic program. Sergeant First Class Panakis and Captain Sanderson, or Rebecca Sanderson, Mrs. Sanderson, run that resilience program. And if you're interested in that, you can reach out to one of the two. But it is a dynamic program, and if you're an E5 or above, it would definitely be a program that could not only benefit you, but it's going to benefit the organization as a whole, a bigger picture. Yeah.
So I went to the 80-hour MRT, and I don't know if that's level 1.
Right. I think you went to level 1. Level 2 allows you to teach level 1s.
Got it.
Okay. And so there are 4 of them in the state. Myself, Rebecca Sanderson, Sergeant Panakis, and Chaplain Barquin.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's also been on our podcast.
Yes.
We're big fans of him too.
Yeah. He's awesome.
So I went to that. I went to the MRT level 1, and I can say it was an unbelievable experience. Right. For those of you listening at home, I left Rhode Island kind of jaded, right? Like, I definitely was in that camp where I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. This is like UMO training or hazmat certifier, where it's like, I'm just going to go get a check in a box because my unit needs one of these things. I had an awesome time, right? Unbelievable experience. to be with other Army professionals and not talk about Army stuff at all, but to just talk about humanity.
And making humans better.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And I don't know if it's anywhere in the budget, but I would say if you're going to be a company commander, I can't tell you how often I leaned back on those exact tools when I was overseas leading a company. I would say at least every day, probably multiple times a day.
Absolutely. And we do them unconsciously too, some of those resilient skills, but having a name assigned to them makes it so much easier to reach out to a soldier and say, okay, put it in perspective, hunt the good stuff, all those key words, But programs like MRT, another one is the Equal Opportunity Leadership course. That's a week-long course, very similar to the MRT. Every unit has to have a primary and alternate, EOL, Equal Opportunity Leader. Courses are just so valuable to not only the soldier or wingman, because I have sent air people through the course, the Equal Opportunity Leadership course, but it just... for your growth, your personal growth, and for your unit and your the organization as a whole, it's just an amazing experience. Another course is the Victim Advocate course, run through for the SHARP program or the Sexual Assault Prevention Response Team. That is an incredible 2-week course, 80-hour course that is available for our soldiers. And then on the air side, there's also a 40-hour program, sexual assault response and prevention program. So these programs for mental health or behavioral health, or these programs to get to know yourself and to get to know others, these are so important. Connectedness again, it's each one of them has a portion that discusses effective communication, being active listeners. So they're really important, because that's part of being a mentor too, right? Is being able to listen and to really hear what that individual is looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And those people we were talking about, victim advocates, EOLs, are so important for building an environment. We'll just use the company as the example. Building a company where everyone feels safe.
Correct.
Which isn't, you can't overemphasize how important it is for everyone to feel safe in their working environment. And if you're a company commander, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to this example over and over again, but when you're in company command, you're really only going to get a good sense of people's mental health well-being twice, right? Like, you'll be in command for 2 years, you'll get 2 command climate surveys, one of which is going to reflect the last guy, right? So the first one that you get probably doesn't reflect you at all. It's probably your predecessors.
Right, right.
And then you're going to get one as you're walking out the door.
Right.
And so for 2 years, you're going to have responsibility for the health and well-being of 100 humans. That, like, if you don't have these team members in place, if you don't have a VA who's really plugged into the unit, EOLs who are really active and plugged into the unit, you may not have that thumb on the pulse. You may not really understand what's going on in your own unit. And there may be soldiers who don't feel safe, don't feel a part of the family, which is indescribably destructive, both to the mission and to, like, the social fabric of that company.
100%. 100%.
I will lean on my own experience to say that this is where I didn't know that I had failed until after I had left command. That I saw only what I saw.
What you wanted to see, probably.
Yeah. And I was privileged enough to get my command climate survey after I had left command, which maybe, I don't know if that's normal, but thankfully you actually provided me my command climate survey.
Right.
After I had left command.
Right, which is fine because you own it. The commander owns the climate assessment.
And discovered that there was a couple of people in my company who didn't feel as though they could report a SHARP violation. I don't think a SHARP violation had actually occurred. So the questions that were in there, those questions didn't come back positive. The questions that came back were if something had happened, they would not have felt comfortable approaching the chain of command. And I was floored. I was devastated, and I was floored. Because I left that command thinking that I had created a safe space, right? Like, I thought that everyone felt included. And like, I think of myself as being extremely approachable. And yet I hadn't created that space. So that's one of those things where if you are not proactive about filling those roles, finding your victim advocates, finding your EOLs, and selecting them well, right? This isn't like, hey there, Private Snuffy, you happened to walk by my office as I was thinking about this. But it's like, no, I picked the right guy, the right gal for this. And they're not engaged, and then I'm not engaged with them.
Right.
This could happen to anybody.
Yeah, these are special assignments, and that I feel that the person needs to be, vested in these programs and interested in helping others to become a part of it. So it's definitely not a check the box, and it's interesting because I teach EOLC, and the first thing that myself and my partner instructor ask on the first day is how many people were voluntold to be here. And the numbers have actually dwindled to near nothing anymore. So people are actually wanting to, fill these positions altruistically, I'd like to think. But they're filling these roles, which is great, and again, when you feel like you're adding value, if you feel like you have a job to do, you're feeling like you're included. So that's important. And not only that, but now you're the subject matter expert in that area, and someone may come and speak to you, maybe not because they have a problem in that specific area, but just because you know the subject. And so they may come to you for mentorship on some level.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of brought this all the way full circle back to mentorship and taking care of soldiers.
Absolutely.
Right. So, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we've covered just about everything. I would like to put out, though, there that if there are any soldiers or anyone on the air side that is interested in joining a diversity council, I would like you to reach out to myself or Captain Insay, because there is definitely there's a lot that goes on that committee, and there's definitely a need to fulfill certain roles in the special emphasis program groups that we have. So if you're interested in getting together and talking about how to break down barriers in the organization, how to look at data, demographics, how to celebrate leadership and observances, please reach out, because the Joint Diversity Executive Council is a great organization or great group to join if you're looking for that specific connectivity for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put some contact information in the comments below. And I'd like to wrap up by saying, if you are interested in being a mentee, if you're out there and you don't feel like you have a mentor, my contact information is in the comments below. Amy's contact information will be in the comments below. Please reach out. We will find you somebody. And if you're interested in being a mentor, please go find the nearest person. But no, if you're interested in being a mentor, I promise you there is somebody within your professional circle who could use your help.
And hopefully in the near future, we will have a place to collect these profiles and put them out there so wingmen and soldiers can go through these profiles and select a mentor that could be their person.
All right. And I'll help build that.
So maybe we could actually attach a example profile sheet.
Sure.
Okay.
We can do that. We'll add a profile. So if you're interested in being a mentor, check out the link in the description below. There's a form you can fill out and mail back to Amy Kane.
All right, then.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for tasking me. Thank you for having me.